Could you please address the joint comprehensive plan of action? Are people justified in fearing an Iranian nuclear bomb? When we're passing away now.
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, what the evidence points to with the JCPOA is actually Iranian compliance with that agreement. You know, I mean, the measures in which Iran, you know, agreed to have its facilities inspected by international institutions and so on, it actually abided by those agreements. It was really the United States that broke the deal under Trump. And so, you know, I mean, first of all, I think it has to be said that, you know, the United States has an incredible nuclear arsenal. You know, it's the notion that people should be afraid of Iran potentially acquiring a nuclear weapon ignores the fact of who actually has nuclear weapons today. And, you know, the United States and plenty of its allies do. So that's something to be addressed. I think that we should all be concerned about the prospect of nuclear weapons existence and their use, but that goes well beyond Iran. When it comes to Iran, Iran actually has been collaborative and has abided by the agreement, but the Trump administration basically would not take yes for an answer. And so it was really the United States that broke the agreement, not Iran.
What is your reaction to Secretary of State Antony G. Blinken's opening remarks before the House Committee on Foreign Affairs on March 10th, 2021, quote, "On non-proliferation, we extended the New START treaty with Russia for 5 years and relaunched diplomacy with our closest European allies to bring Iran back into compliance with the JCPOA."
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit dishonest, in my opinion, to frame the United States as the power that's trying to pursue peace and Iran as the power that's trying to evade it. I mean, this comes after the US just carried out an attack, actually on Syria, but claiming to attack an Iranian-backed militia. So this idea that the United States can bomb, you know, a militia that it claims is aligned with Iran, and then say, "Oh, we're really interested in diplomacy," you know, and the problem here is that Iran is not interested. It's just not true. It's not honest. And what it would really take to demonstrate U.S. willingness to go to the negotiating table, it would mean actually reducing the incredible military presence. I mean, you know, the U.S. has this sort of permanent military presence in the Middle East, but then additional to that, last year and the year before, Trump put more troops in the Middle East that were explicitly directed at Iran, right? And so a gesture of goodwill would be the United States saying, okay, you know what, we're actually going to withdraw these troops from the neighboring countries. We're actually going to no longer put aircraft carrier groups in the Gulf, which the US has been doing for over a year now. And where we're not going to carry out military operations against, you know, Iranian-backed or you know, against Iran or any entities that are aligned with Iran. And then, of course, you know, the US should lift the sanctions as well. I mean, the sanctions have increased since the US backed out of the JCPOA. So, you know, if the US actually took those steps or even signaled that it wanted to take those steps, then that would be a different conversation. But in the absence of that, I think it's really dishonest for the US to cast itself as the one interested in diplomacy.
But the typical framing is that this is in order to contain Iran. And for example, Robert Kagan would argue that this military presence is a guarantee of a general peace, as he put it recently.
Right. I mean, I just think that the actual history tells the opposite story, like, so, we're in 2021. This September will be the 20th anniversary of the terror attacks, on September 11th, 2001, and the beginning of the war on terror, which has unfortunately extended all over the world, but is really centered in the Middle East and in Central Asia and in North Africa as well. And I think the question is, is there more peace in the Middle East since the US launched the war on terror? Is there more peace since the US invaded Iraq in 2003? Is there more peace since the US has not only acted with its own military, but supported Saudi Arabia and the UAE in their war in Yemen and elsewhere, since the US has increased its support for Israel and its hostility toward Iran and various other countries in the region? No, like, this has been an absolute catastrophe, and so the only direction to go in, if we're talking about peace, is actually demilitarization. It's pulling back US forces. It's saying that the US has no legitimate right to be, bombing places or maintaining troop presences in different places. It's like, how can the US be part of forging a new set of relationships all around the world, but particularly in the Middle East, that are based on collaboration, and grounded in a mutual respect for, people's humanity across borders, not through the military. I mean, there's no evidence that the militarization is bringing peace.
You and Mrs. Bennis conclude your article with the words, "And regardless of who is the commander-in-chief giving orders to US bombers, we know that deploying US troops and US drones and US warplanes across the region doesn't provide safety or security for Iraqis or Syrians, not for Iranians or for Americans. Then why does this pattern continue?"
Right. That's a really important question. I don't think that the aim was ever safety. I think that it's about maintaining US power in the world, and in particular in the Middle Eastern region. When the US invaded Afghanistan in 2001, or 2002 rather, and in Iraq in 2003, at that point, the US had quite a number of states throughout the Middle East that were closely aligned with the United States. Israel, of course, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Jordan, any number of states. And yet there were a couple of outliers, that were not yet integrated into firmly into the American orbit. And in particular, the United States couldn't count on Iraq or Syria or Iran, as willing to go along with US hegemony. And so, I think that in many ways, that's what those invasions were about. It was saying, listen, we essentially have the compliance, the complicity, the collaboration of the majority of states in this region, and we want 100% of the states in this region. And so they launched these invasions to by force, kind of force that compliance. I think that's been the aim. It hasn't been about safety. For what it's worth, it has also failed strategically. I mean, not only has the US not secured the kind of hegemony that it has wanted in the Middle East, but actually it's arguably lost its edge in many ways. Iran has emerged as a more powerful regional power in the Middle East since these US invasions, for example. So across the board, whether you're concerned with humanity, which I think we all should be, or even from the perspective of investment in US power, these have been catastrophic, these wars, this militarization.
How optimistic are you when Biden appoints Wendy Sherman, Rob Malley to senior positions regarding U.S. Iran policy?
Right, that's a good question, because both Rob Malley and Wendy Sherman have histories of being very invested in diplomacy with Iran, and as opposed to a more militaristic approach. What I think this indicates is actually that at the moment, the Biden administration is divided on the question of Iran. They're not sure exactly what their tack should be. On one hand, I think that there is a desire in the administration to return to the JCPOA and to have a new set of relations with Iran post-Trump. On the other hand, I think there are those who actually want to maintain a hostile posture. This isn't just in the administration, it's in the US Congress as well. I think is divided a bit on the question of how to move forward with Iran. Unfortunately, there's very little kind of asserting the human rights of Iranians. There's very little calling attention to the humanitarian crisis in Iran. But in terms of how to proceed with US-Iran relations, I think that they're a bit divided. So, when they announced the appointment of Sherman and Malley, those of us who've been following this, oh, okay, that's really interesting. Maybe that signals that they're interested in a more a diplomatic approach. But then, there was a hearing in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee about Wendy Sherman's confirmation. And it was the rhetoric was incredibly hostile toward Iran. And of the senators, and then actually Sherman herself, she voiced what Avril Haines and Antony Blinken have also voiced, which is a more cautious approach when it comes to returning to the negotiating table with Iran. So how optimistic am I? I am hopeful, but not hopeful because of Biden's actions in and of themselves. I think that those actions offer some room for those of us who are advocates of transforming the US's relationship with Iran. There's more space for us to do that, say, okay, we should demilitarize. And actually, there are people who, if that is the policy, if the policy is demilitarization, is negotiation, is collaboration and cooperation, then people like Rob Malley and Wendy Sherman are in a good position to be part of that effort. But it's not a guarantee if we don't push for it.
This sounds similar to what Professor Rachel Barker told me about Biden administration's position on justice reform, and what your colleague Chuck Collins told me about Wall Street and the Biden administration, that there is a possibility to push him.
Yeah, I think that, just to take a bit of a step back, US politics is in this very interesting moment, actually. We've got this absolute catastrophe of the COVID crisis here. We've had more people die here than any other country in the world. And it's just been a total failure, really, by the government at every level. And many people are outraged and sickened by that. You've got this very serious problem of the far right, which up until a few months ago had a president in the White House, who was advocating for very far right white nationalist policies that included, aggressive militarist responses to everything domestically and in foreign policy. And then at the same time, you've got this incredible Black Lives Matter movement, which has forced this conversation about, repressive policing and about militarization here, about public resources, because there's a call to redirect resources away from the police to invest them in human needs. And the whole question actually of government spending is enormously on the table. I mean, at this moment, there is this debate in Congress about spending $1.9 trillion to invest in, what are pretty severe public needs in the face of the COVID crisis. And the right wing is trying to undermine it. And, and that actually includes conservatives within Biden's party, the Democratic Party. So this is a bit of a crossroads, in US politics. And it makes sense to me that whether we're talking about US policy toward Iran or regulating Wall Street or, the question of Biden's approach to the police, that actually they have different and competing perspectives within the same party and even within the administration. And there's an opportunity to push, but it will only happen if we push. The changes will only happen if we continue to push.